also really value data provided by experts. And so Trustee Robinson mentioned the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus report, and I found that to be really informative. So per their assessment, in terms of luxury units, 1,751 multifamily units have been built across 17 buildings since 2012. And of the rental units, only 50 were affordable, 5 of which have now since reverted to market value. Since the passing of the inclusionary housing ordinance, we haven't seen any new affordable units. And so if and when new luxury does come before the board, I'd like to see a strengthened IHO so that we're at least getting more set aside units and higher in lieu of fees that can go into the trust to support the kinds of developments that Trustee Enya was describing, which are what we really need more of in Oak Park. Because we need more housing, we need more density, and as we're building more and more densely, we also need to balance that by setting fair rules in which we're getting more out of our agreements with developers, and that so these wealthy developers are paying what they owe, and that we can build more towards our goals and towards our values.
Thank you. Now we're moving on to the third question, and several of you touched on this topic already. And I'm gonna I'm gonna just give you a heads up so you have a little chance to think about it. Jim Taglia, Jim, Josh, Vicky will be the first 3 to this one. So Jim, Josh, Vicky, so I'll give you the mic right away. Many Oak Parkers are concerned about the lack of affordable housing in the village. Please describe at least 2 ways that village board action can add affordable housing units to Oak Park and/or protect and preserve existing, in quotes, more affordable housing options in both our vintage apartment buildings and more modest single-family homes. And so, as I just said, Jim and Josh.
We're talking about maintaining socioeconomic diversity in Oak Park, and that's essential. I think everyone here would agree. One of the things I did on the board was I voted to enact the first inclusionary zoning ordinance during my term, which requires developments to either contribute a certain amount of money or a number of units, affordable units, to Oak Park and to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And as a result of that effort, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund has garnered millions of dollars in this period, which has been used in many other affordable units, such as the 801 801 Van Buren in Oak Park, which is a workforce development unit. That's very important. So that mechanism has worked. It's funded millions of dollars and has made a big difference in Oak Park. And I mean, we've got a lot of affordable housing now coming online, even more in the years to come. And I think that's very important, and it's been effective. Certainly it could be tweaked. Certainly everything should be looked at and reviewed, but it is a successful mechanism. I'm very proud of that. One of the other things to mention also is how do we keep the other units affordable? And really one of the biggest ways to do that is to keep our village levy reasonable, to keep our taxes down, to watch the bottom line, to cut expenses when necessary, to do that kind of hard work, to keep our village affordable. Really, that's one of the biggest things we can do. And so I do think that that's sometimes not talked about or it's overlooked, but it's critical. So those are the couple of things. Thank you very much.
Sorry. And I know I want to respect your guidance that this isn't a debate, but I wanted to reflect a little bit on some of what has been said about luxury housing. Really, luxury is a marketing term. Any new market rate housing in Oak Park is effectively luxury housing. I mean, that's what it is. Building new housing at market rates is very, very expensive. But we know by the data, I follow the data on housing a lot, and we know that any new supply in a market helps to foster affordability by a process called filtering. So basically, you supply new housing at the top, and this takes the pressure, especially in a tight market like we have right now, it takes the pressure off the bottom. So if you don't have that new supply, all that naturally occurring affordable housing out there that we have, those vintage buildings, those old homes, people upgrade them. they raise the rents, they add on and so forth, and that drives up prices, and that decreases affordability. So the more we can supply at any level, I think, at the market rate level, also affordable housing too, and in the missing middle, the more affordable Oak Park is going to be as a result. And we know this works. The Illinois Housing Development Authority says that in 2013, we had about 18% affordability in Oak Park. And in 2023, we had about 23% affordability in Oak Park. So that's the result of the big boost in development that we did in Oak Park. And some of that was market rate housing. Quite a lot of it was market rate housing. So we know that that works. I also support the IZO and the Affordable Housing Fund 100%. I love the 810 building over on Oak Park Avenue. It's a great addition to the neighborhood. And as Trustee Anya mentioned, we have 2 great new projects that are coming out of the Affordable Housing Fund as well. So I think that's also another way to support affordability.
Hello. So yes, I love this question. So I do. The current village board has been the most effective at keeping the levy reasonable of any modern board in modern history. So we do share that goal, as well as, so your question is about taking care of housing stock that is currently affordable, as well as how can we grow that. So the first thing we need to do is care for the affordable housing stock that we do have. I live in a small bungalow, and so the best thing, I do worry that, if I go to sell, somebody's going to buy that, put a second floor up, boom, flip it, and now a starter home at an Oak Park potential is off the market, or that bungalow might be purchased by an Airbnb. So the best thing that we can do is keep the programs that we have that help homeowners maintain their homes so that they stay in good condition. There are CDBG grants and other types of grants that also help people stay or age in place. Additionally, for a new affordable housing stock, I definitely do, is well overdue to review our inclusionary housing ordinance and update it so that we have stronger in lieu of fees, and that we're seeing that be effective more in a greater area of our community. I would venture reviewing our zoning code for increasing opportunities for that missing middle, but we do have more conversations to be had on these things because we want to be intentional that we're also protecting the housing stock that we've just mentioned as being affordable. And so would I maybe want to try a pilot program that protects some of our homes in South Oak Park from being, if we were to release some of those zoning requirements that would incentivize duplexes, triplexes, et cetera. We don't want to see that be taking away those small single family homes I've already mentioned. Okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
So being a landlocked community with very limited available space, I think, I want to focus my answer on preserving and protecting our current sort of, in quotes, more affordable housing units. And one way is, I think, to ensure continued funding for our small home rehab grant program. And that program is actually currently receives federal dollars. And so I definitely would want to keep an eye on that in the new term and ensure that the funding level for that program stays consistent. But what that grant does is it allows low to moderate income homeowners grants to maintain their home, to make sure that their home is within code compliance, to address any safety or health hazards that might exist in their home. And I think that that's really important in maintaining that type of housing stock for that economic demographic. The second thing is an energy efficiency grant program that the board recently, myself included, added additional funding to. Unlike the small home rehab program that I just talked about, the energy efficiency grant program has a nice feature in that it's open to all income levels and it's open on a sliding scale basis. But what I like about that program is that it hits our sustainability goal. And I'm always looking for opportunities when we can sort of get two values, two goals in one shot. And this is a grant program that allows us to do that. And overall, a more energy efficient home is a home that's more affordable to maintain. I think we have to look at affordability, not just from purchase price points, but also what is the cost of maintaining that home? And so this particular program allows for energy upgrades, again, across all income levels, and I would support maintaining funding for that program.
Thank you. Ravi and then Jenna.
So Oak Park has an average household cost or house price of $440K, right? For a community that has that price point as the average, we have one of the highest affordable housing percentages. 23.5% of our households are considered affordable. So that's a pretty significant number. Now, what's happening and what's evidenced in the housing study also is that we are missing some specific kinds of housing that are in the middle, which prevents people who can afford a higher house from getting those houses in Oak Park. So they make or they buy a house that they can easily afford because they don't have options, the next higher option. That puts a strain on the capacity that we have. The 23.5% gets logged in. So how can we ease the pressure on some of the lower price points by encouraging people to move up the chain by creating the right kind of inventory in a targeted fashion? That will go a long way towards affordable housing. Now, we are a landlocked community, and our ability to expand infinitely, it does not exist, right? So, there is a theoretical limit to how many units we can build, and then it's pure supply and demand. So prices will get pushed up. So there is that. But there are other levers we can use to make our community more affordable. So to Jim's point, I think being very careful and thoughtful about our expenses would be one aspect of it, but also the diversification of our tax base. So we have an opportunity to make sure that we have the ability to diversify our tax base to bring down our overdependence on real estate taxes. So if we can do that, even by a small amount, that could provide a lot of relief for a lot of families.
Thank you. Now Jenna, and then Chibuke at the last.
So I know we're talking about economic development as, an important objective for the Village of Oak Park. We're also talking about housing, which is where people live, right? Housing is a basic human need, and we're talking about providing that in a way so that homes and safe, stable housing is accessible to more and more people, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. And in order to do that, we have to address a real, actual affordability crisis. It's a national housing crisis, but we see that here in Oak Park. So going back to the MMR report, or sorry, the MMC report, actually, Oak Park is less affordable than 93% of Illinois municipalities. That's based on Illinois' assessment across the state. So that 23.4% affordability actually puts us in makes us a low affordability community, right? So we have work to do. We're gonna do that work together, right? It's a national crisis, but we're gonna solve it by working together. And so the question asks for specific actions that the board can take. I already mentioned the increase in lieu fees, increasing the new units required in the affordable units required in new development. development. 20% is the recommendation in that report. And would only allow developers to opt out of no more than half of the required units. And then the other recommendation, establishing density bonuses to incentivize developers to include those required affordable units instead of, opting out. So we're talking about affordable housing, but it's not just because we care about people, although we do, and we want everyone to have a safe and stable home, but that's a return on investment for the entire community. It's going to make all of us safer. It's going to make our community more vibrant. We're going to keep more money in our community. And it's, if we ensure stable housing for more people, it's going to benefit all of us ultimately, and that's what we should be aiming for.
Thank you. And for the last, Chibike, if you would finish up.
She said all the good stuff. What I would say is, we face a problem because we don't necessarily have the units that really address our low income housing. So what we do need to do is make sure that we build a more robust inclusionary housing ordinance that allows for more dollars to flow through so that we can help first time homeowners that haven't had the opportunity to even get into a home yet. So that we can say, okay, here, we're going to start you off with X amount of dollars, or this home loan program that will allow for you to move into our community and then build up so you have dollars to put towards a home. Because I think when we talk about affordable, Oak Park is at $107,000 at the average income rate, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the Oak Parkers that live here. So we do need to figure out how are we going to address that. One, you address the missing middle by getting more homes that are a little bit more diversified and offer for different opportunities, but also allow for different people to live here too. That allows the costs to go down and allows people to make this place a little bit more affordable for their budgets. Like Trustee Pericott was saying before, sometimes you have people that are living what you would say is below their means because they know they can't reach that next step up, but they don't want to live in low income housing. So they are using up all of that middle space and then making it even more difficult for people to find and establish themselves into low income housing. So we got to figure out a way to put dollars into that, our ICOs. We've got to figure out ways to work with our partners like the Regional Housing Center and identify how do we get that low income and how do we bring them into Oak Park and attract them into Oak Park, because the real, the whole theory of it all is it's not affordable, and we haven't been addressing it for quite some time. So we need to actually work with our partners. We need to work with our landlords in figuring out how do we make Oak Park more affordable, and are we really actually engaging everyone? As I look into the room, we're not even to the level of the people that we need to be addressing right now. So that's the thing. How are we going to engage them in a process that makes them feel like this is the place for them? We have to be meeting them where they're at and making sure that we're asking them, how do we help you out? How do we get from point A to point B? For me personally, I see the red. For me personally, like I said, I literally bought the cheapest house that I could find in Oak Park because that's all I could afford. And I think for people who were in apartments like me, I was lucky enough, I lived on Carpenter and Jackson, and we were at the one apartment in the middle of the block. And all of us eventually did find housing, and we all found it in our own unique ways, but it was very difficult for each member in that building to find housing.
Thank you so much. And a little overtime, but good stuff. So thank you. Okay, after 3 questions, I'm always jittery, but we can take a deep breath and say, okay, now the next question, we're going to start and we're going to just go down 1, 2, 3. So Josh, Jim, Lucy, and then we're going to jump over to Robbie for number 4, for the 4th person in this sequence. So Oak Park's unique historical and architectural character has been one of its strengths, and even part of its marketing brand, you might say, that sets it apart from many Metro Chicago communities, attracting both new residents and economic development in the form of tourist spending and positive public relations. I think we have more architects per capita than many communities. So do you,
Do you support the current Oak Park Historic Preservation Ordinance? Why or why not? And what changes, if any, would you like to see in how we protect and enhance our historic neighborhoods?
So I'm a huge fan of historic preservation. Currently, I'm watching on YouTube the restoration of I think it's a 17th century French chateau that's made out of masonry and timber frame. And I totally geek out on that. I found it and I went back and I watched like the last 3 years of it and so forth. I love it. In Oak Park, we have about 100, maybe a little less than 100 of those architectural gems, and they deserve the highest level of conservation. They definitely do, as the question states, drive tourism, and they give Oak Park a well-deserved reputation as a destination for historical architecture. But outside those buildings and small areas around them, I don't think that historic neighborhood preservation is accomplishing those goals of tourism and architectural reputation and giving us a brand. Neighborhood presentation actually helps to prevent architectural innovation. We're not building the new forms of the future. We're preserving those of the past. It decreases affordability for those who own homes in those districts. So that's an issue for affordability as well. It prevents new multifamily housing in those districts almost entirely. It slows our sustainability goals. So really, this neighborhood presentation outside of these architectural gems and those few small neighborhoods that are really tourist destinations is really about preserving the past and kind of ignoring the future needs of Oak Park. So I would ask you to imagine a future Oak Park, which is a worldwide showcase of innovative architecture that's leaning towards the future and innovative architectural forms that both respect our architectural heritage, but provide diverse and new types of architecture for a diverse and growing population.
Thank you. Our architectural heritage in Oak Park is really a cornerstone of our community identity. And I support the Historic Preservation Ordinance and advocate for its consistent application throughout the village to protect our historic neighborhoods. Any proposed changes should be carefully considered and to enhance preservation efforts. And we really need to accommodate thoughtful, context-sensitive development in Oak Park. In my time on the board, I think I had 3 developments that I voted against that were redevelopments and proposed developments around Marion Street that were not context-sensitive. And I voted against them because I just didn't think they fit. So it's also been said that ordinances like the Historic Preservation Ordinance are stemmed in racism. And while historically this is likely true, I don't believe it's in its current form. It promotes or contributes to racism. So I do think that we really need to nurture our Historic Preservation Ordinance and maintain it moving forward. Thank you.
So I was very excited to see this question. I am the board's liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission, and it is one of my favorite parts about being a trustee. I have immense respect for the commission and the level of technical expertise that they bring to assessing the certificates of appropriateness that come before them. The commission does really commendable work. That being said, I do think that we can improve upon the Historic Preservation Ordinance. And what I'd like to see is specifically related to instances where a homeowner is seeking relief from the guidelines in the form of a request for economic hardship waiver. Currently, the way the ordinance is written, there's a 45-day window in which those certificates have to come before the commission, and then a separate 45-day window in which those certificates come before the village board. So combined, you could could potentially have a homeowner who is facing economic hardship of some form. In some instances, they're homeowners that have been displaced from their home while they're going through this process. You could potentially have them waiting 90 days if you combine both processes at the commission level and at the village board level. I think that's too long to grant relief to a homeowner that's seeking it. So I would recommend shortening both windows to 30 days. 30 days, within 30 days of filing, it's got to be heard by the commission. Within 30 days of filing or appealing, really it is, to the village board, the village board's got to hear it. And I think shortening those time periods are really for the benefit of those residents who are really seeking our help in requesting a waiver.
Let me share a short story. So, when I was growing up, the childhood home that I grew up in was architected by a close friend of my dad, and he was inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. Right. So, when I came to the States and I ended up in Oak Park, coming here through the Regional Housing Center to look at properties here, one thing that struck me, I didn't know much about Frank Lloyd Wright. I knew the name, I knew some of his work, but it really struck me, right, as to the character it lends to a community like Oak Park, because I've been in other communities in the US, and most of them are cookie cutter, subdivisions. And this really spoke to me. And this is 18 years back, and I've made this home, and it's spoken to me in a way that has compelled me to stay back in this community and contribute to it. So I think historic preservation has a significant part, and it resonates globally, not just in our small context here in Oak Park. Now I think the historic preservation aspects of it. So there is an economic value to it, right? So it is not just about the legacy from an architectural standpoint, but it's about what it does to our future. So from an economic development standpoint, enabling our small businesses through tourism or attracting tourism. So there is a big component of that. So protecting that is also going to be important. Now, one thing I would say, and to Josh's point, to the extent we develop, if we are developing, I think it's important for us to raise the bar in terms of what architectural standards we deploy, because we are creating, today is tomorrow's history, right? So we are creating the history of the future. So we should be conscious of that. So staying true to our legacy is also going to be setting standards for our present that contributes to that legacy in the future. So I think those three elements are really, really important for me to keep in mind. Thanks.
Growing up here, living in Oak Park for most of my life, I've, grown to have this amazing sense of pride for Oak Park. And a lot of it has to do with its architecture. Every time I bring a friend back from college or anyone comes to visit me from my family to Nigeria to my in-laws from Iowa, they're just blown away by the historical beauty that our village has there. They can't believe it. I remember my mother-in-law's mom came, and she was so excited about the brick homes. She's like, I love these brick homes. We don't have this. We don't do it like this. And I said, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come back after college. I said, it's beautiful. And I remember us having this almost very similar question last time around. And I said to myself, are we fighting to preserve our history or to build a future? And I said, why can't it be both, right? Why can't it be both? Because what our Historic Preservation Commission has done is great work for the past, 60 years? I mean, they've been putting in so much, right around there? Yeah, they've done a great job of preserving these buildings. My son's girlfriend lives in the developer's house in River Forest that worked with Frank Lloyd Wright to build up that little gated community, and you see some of the work that has gone into Oak Park, and it's amazing. But what we need to make sure is very similar to what Trustee Robinson said, is that the process is more streamlined, that it doesn't take forever, because some of the repairs that people need to do on their homes are very immediate. And some of them are not just simple cosmetic changes. They're, very intricate, detailed ones. So it takes a very long time sometimes for that process and then for it to get to us. And we sometimes look like the bad guy because we know that this person needs to do this to their home. So how do we make sure that we're engaging properly and giving it the proper consideration and not just changing the whole aesthetic of what that home's beauty is? So I think it's definitely great work that they've been doing. I want to continue to see the work done. I think we can always improve. That's something we should always know, is we can always get better at what we're doing, how we're doing it, making it more efficient. And that's all I would want to see, is that we're making it more efficient and we're keeping it, one of the top 50 places in the world to visit. Like, that's amazing. I now have another sense of pride.
Yeah, I don't need to explain to anyone in this room that we are a community that values our history, our architectural history, the beautiful architecture and the legacy of our architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, and the significance in the homes and the buildings and the landmarks. In our history in Oak Park is culturally lucrative. It's economically lucrative. In this moment, when I think about history, I'm thinking about how history itself is under attack in our country, and this widespread censorship of even the honest recognition of history, including historical barriers to homeownership for Black families, and our own historic commitment to racial equity and integration. And so I think it's a good moment to reflect on how we can combine and respect historic preservation with our commitment to racial equity. And they don't have to be in opposition to each other. We can strengthen or complement the existing historic preservation ordinances and rules with really transparent and clear processes around how we are also at the same time going to be addressing our commitment to racial equity and increasing affordability. When we get to the missing middle part, I think that also helps to imagine how historic preservation in terms of architecture can be maintained while expanding the number of units. But something else that's on my mind as we're sort of bracing ourselves for all of the impending cuts from the federal government, there are also these tax credits for restoration or rehab for historic homes, and that I think we're going to have to, it's one of the many things we're going to have to face, most likely being cut from things that we've benefited from in our village. And in this case, it will impact potentially the way in which we engage with historic preservation of landmarks and homes.
So I do want to thank everybody for being here tonight. The Historic Preservation Commission, Lucia is the liaison to that. In 2023, we were a little concerned because several cases had come before the village board of where we were being asked to override or consider overriding a decision from the Historic Preservation Commission. And after Lucia and I met then with members of the Historic Preservation Commission to talk that through with them out of great respect for the work that they do. And out of that, I don't know if it was actually in response to those conversations, but I was extremely grateful. The Historic Preservation Commission hosted a series of talks where they brought in speakers. And one of the speakers is Bonnie McDonald, the Landmark Illinois president and CEO. And she has written a guidebook called the Relevancy Guide, Historic Preservation Relevancy Guidebook. And so I would be interested in our Historic Preservation Commission and members of our community, because an effort like that needs to be driven with members of our community to work through that guidebook. Obviously written because we're not the first community that has struggled with balancing our love for historic preservation, our love for our beautiful architecture, and remembering that these are homes that people live in that need to meet the needs of today. And that it's that cherishing of the people, places, and things that really is the historical aspect that we want to preserve, and as well as acknowledging that Oak Park is a destination location for its beautiful architecture. And we do it well. And we do it and we preserve it well because of the success of the Historic Preservation Commission. So some of the reason that I'd like to see the Historic Preservation Commission in our community, maybe a task force works through that guidebook, is to make sure that we're continuing that good work for the next 50 years.
Thank you. Thank you. On to the next question. We'll start off with Jenna and then move to Ravi. So the first two will be Jenna and Ravi. This has been mentioned a little bit earlier in some of the other responses. The current village board has had some recent discussions about the missing middle. And I know there's different ways of thinking about missing middle, but one of the part of the concept is to add more smaller multifamily buildings in single family zoning districts. Think 2 flats, 4 flats, 6 flats, 8 flats, that kind of thing. This will require zoning changes. Do you support or oppose the general concept? Why or why not? Jenna.
Excuse me. So as prices for single family homes continue to get more and more out of reach for moderate income individuals and families, the missing middle approach is a really great opportunity for us to see the kind of diversity in housing stock that will be necessary to have more housing, more accessible and affordable for people here in Oak Park. And I'm thinking about people who live in Oak Park who maybe can't afford or to live here and wanting to remedy that. And this is one opportunity in which we can do so. This will require strategically updating our zoning ordinances and regulations to allow these kinds of changes and new kinds of development or new kinds of housing in what is already zoned for only single families, but it'll be aesthetically and in terms of size, it'll fit in. And that'll make it more within reach for potentially older folks who want to stay in Oak Park, but they can downsize, newer families to enter our community, just making more accessible housing for more kinds of people. I'm just learning about this approach. I think it's really interesting, and I'm really excited to see other communities who have already adopted this having really great outcomes already, outpacing sort of the expectation. And I think that's really a good sign for us to try to model. And we should look at this as an opportunity to expand variety, not only to see more rental opportunities, but also 2 and 3 bedroom rental opportunities, but making home ownership also more accessible.
Now to Ravi next, and Chibike next after that.
So the missing middle as defined by the housing study is 2 to 19 units that come in. And then as I mentioned earlier, what's happening is because those do not exist, because there are no options for people to come into the middle, people underbuy, or they buy houses below their means, or whatever configuration you take. So I think as demographics shift in our community, as we have a very growing senior population, and the needs of a senior population is very different from when you have young family versus family with multiple school-going kids or what have you. So as people are shifting through or moving through life, giving options and opportunities to move through our community is going to be really key. Now the question is, how do we do that? So the need does exist, but how we address that need within keeping it consistent with the character of our neighborhoods and making sure that it does not diminish the broader value of our community to the outside world. So there are lots of factors to be considered. So I would be really careful and thoughtful in terms of zoning changes that contribute to that outcome. It is so the need exists. How we get there needs a lot more thinking. And I'm somebody, especially from a zoning perspective, I don't believe in quick knee-jerk changes to zoning. I would be much more deliberate about where zoning changes happen and how they impact not just short term but long term.
Thank you.
Well, hello. So I think I definitely support those changes. I think that you need to diversify what that housing stock looks like. To what I was saying before, are you holding on to the past or preserving or creating this future? I think it's a little bit of both. And why can't you create a housing stock that matches our aesthetic? We could make something that I was just envisioning this whole time. If you saw me smiling, thinking of like a Frank Lloyd Wright house that had two sides, and you have a neighbor coming in one way and your neighbor's coming in the other side, and having, that be your two flat. You can make these things possible. We have amazing architects out there now. We have people who can build into our history and make it a new future. So I'm excited about that opportunity. When we think about the missing middle, there has already been a missing middle process here in Oak Park. Go through Pleasant, go through the different parts of South Oak Park, and you'll see that that missing middle is there. It just needs to be opened up a little bit more. We need to find these projects that are right for the right areas. I think you can see that, my parents live on Lombard, and I almost aged myself in looking at this new house that was built up in the middle. I go, this doesn't even fit our block. And my dad says, I know, right? So you got to make things that also fit the area, because it does throw things off when you build a massive 4-story house on a block that normally most of the houses are 2 stories. You want to do the right by, and that was the one that was, and I'm not throwing that person under the bus, but that was just a 1-family house. So imagine if you use that same space for something that could have fit 4 to 3 families. And I think that we just have to be more thoughtful about that process. And we have to take each process step by step. We have to go through our commissions. We have to work with them to figure out, how is this right for what we're doing right here on this block? And if it passes one way, we still get to look at it as a village and say, okay, well, this doesn't actually match our goals. This isn't what we were looking at when we thought about the missing middle. This is just something that is filling a space, and that's not what we're here to do.
Excellent. Next two in a row, Jim and Josh.
Thank you. Introducing smaller multifamily buildings in single-family zoning areas can offer diverse housing options and promote affordability. I support exploring zoning changes that allow for such developments, provided they are designed to complement existing neighborhood aesthetics and include community input in the planning process. I would also caution that by replacing single-family homes with multi-unit buildings, the price of single-family homes may possibly increase and will be forced higher due to more demand and less supply. And that's a consideration that can't be overlooked, and it needs to be really investigated. I will say that zoning, as I learn about it, and I've learned about it in the past, it's the most incredibly complex topic that the board faces, because it has so many facets to it, and it just takes a long time to consider. So I do appreciate the idea that we could take this not at a slow pace, but at a deliberate pace, and be very cautious and careful about it, understanding all the ramifications and implications it provides. I think that's important. Thank you.
So yes, I do support missing middle housing, and I support an approach which is called the next increment of density. So an example would be in a single family district, you would allow the next increment would be a 2-flat or a 3-flat. In places that already allow a 3-flat, you might allow smaller apartment buildings or townhomes and so forth. So, going through our zoning code and allowing that next increment of housing density that opens up that 2 to 19 unit market. I am definitely against any sort of a large step change in a neighborhood. I don't think anybody wants a development that's out of scale for their area. And I think we need to be very sensitive to the built environment and the neighborhood that these new forms are going to bring. But like other people have mentioned, we've got a lot of great architects around here, and there are some communities that actually have pre-approved forms for missing middle housing. So, you could have a developer go to a list of things that the community has already vetted and say, it doesn't need to be cookie cutter either. They can kind of vary on those as well. So I think that's a great opportunity to allow some architectural innovation that is true to our heritage as a place for architectural innovation. I support missing middle for a lot of the reasons that other people have already other folks on the stage here have already mentioned, because it gives us more abundant housing. It supports housing affordability. It supports diverse housing. So for example, our seniors can age in the community. They can downsize when they don't need that large home anymore. And it also provides the housing so that our children could afford to live here as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I love walking around Oak Park and seeing the diversity of types of homes and buildings you'll see in one area. Pleasant Home District, you'll see a 3-flat next to a Victorian, next to, a Victorian that was split up into 4 townhomes. And that's beautiful. It tells us a bit about history. And the Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio was divided up so that the Frank Lloyd Wright's ex-wife could continue to live there after he left. And so at various points, multiple people lived in Frank Lloyd Wright home and studio with her and her children. And that's the kind of inclusivity and welcoming of diversity we want to see here in the Village of Oak Park, and the ability for people to age in place. I'm definitely supportive of looking at our zoning to maximize potential for a missing middle that fills a purpose. So similar to what we've heard from some of my colleagues here, I do think that with the conversations we would have at the board table before moving forward with that decision would be to more clearly define our goals so that any potential pilot programs or areas of our community that we would consider that for, we're maximizing opportunity that actually fills a gap. And doesn't put at risk, like we talked about earlier, those single family homes that are currently affordable, and we want to see them remain on the market as an example. Thank you.
So I support examining changes to zoning to determine whether or not we can sort of get at this missing middle gap that we're talking about here. And that's been pointed out in the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus study that's also been referred to here. And that study, I think, is really going to be our starting point for looking at zoning and looking at opportunities to ease some zoning restrictions. For me, I think the critical framework, though, is going to be one where we're seeking to create a balance, because we have community values, and we've talked a lot about historic preservation as a community value. We haven't talked about sustainability. That's another community value. We just passed an electrification ordinance, which has very firm requirements on new development, including new residential development, that extend not just to the primary home itself, but even to external spaces. So it doesn't allow for any even gas grill hookups. It extends to a garage that's built in conjunction with that new home. These values are important. They're part of what makes us a park, and I think a desirable place to live. It's going to be really important to balance these values against any relaxing anything we do to zoning regulations to relax some of those restrictions. Because if we don't create the right balance, we're going to test that old adage that says, if you build it, they will come. We will build it, but they will not come, because we will be compromising potentially some of the things and some of the values that make Oak Park just a beautiful, vibrant place for us all to live. And so I think centering the desire to have a balance is going to be most important. And then I'll just end by saying, I think the next step would be something that this board has done, sort of the brainchild of President Skaman, and a number of different sort of large scale decisions, which is forming an advisory committee that's going to be very specifically looking at zoning. We've done it for the Oak Park Avenue streetscape, for alternative crisis response, for the Village Hall facility plans. I find that framework to be very, very helpful as a board member, because a temporary
And if you
committee
read it in the
can
journal,
have the
Dan
charge
Haley
of
is
very
stepping
specifically
back
looking
as
at zoning. And we
CEO,
can pull from
stepping back
community
as an
experts,
advisor to
residents who have specific experience or expertise in this area, to really do a deep dive on
gotta
how
read the
we do create that right balance for zoning.
Thank you, thank you. We're winding down now because the goal is to end soon after 8:30, so we don't have to get kicked out of the library too much. And hopefully we'll all have a chance to come and say hi to, and get some literature on the way out, et cetera. So a couple questions. I'm gonna ask a question and then give you a quick 1-minute follow-up. So we're gonna start out, keep the microphone with Lucia. Is Travel Lemming, recently named Oak Park as one of the 50 best places to travel in the world in 2025, includes large places like Warsaw, Brisbane, Tokyo, one of only 11 in the United States. That's not uncommon for Oak Park to be recognized for being a place to visit or something fantastic about our community. Architecture, community character, cultural offerings, sometimes diversity-related, sort of accommodations we received. What economic development, specific projects or types might tie into and somehow build that appreciation or build on that appreciation of architectural heritage, streetscapes, diversity, walkable community character. So we'll start off with Lucia and then go to Chibuke.
So I'll start with something that we just passed at the Village Board table, which is the Chicago Avenue Percy Julian Streetscape Project. So the impetus for that was a motion that I brought forward to create sort of a naming policy to recognize notable Oak Parkers. Dr. Julian, world renowned in the industries of medicine and pharmacy, was a longtime Oak Parker, and I think is worthy of such recognition. Coincidentally, his home is also on Chicago Avenue, which is a corridor that the current board is looking at revitalizing. And so it's important, though, to have an actual naming framework so that we aren't doing this sort of ad hoc, and it's something that can be replicated going forward, a very well-defined, transparent process by which we acknowledge, long-standing, long-time Oak Parkers who I think deserve some recognition in our community. And so staff built upon that and came back with a broader idea for just sort of a larger streetscape project along Chicago Avenue. So that would be something that I would support moving forward with in the new term.
Trying to save these batteries. No, I think I wholeheartagly agree with what Trustee Robinson just said. If you know me, because of former trustee Taglia showing me and teaching me more about the Julian family. Sorry, I went to Emerson, so I was an Emerson guy, and we were always beefing. But because of that, I gained this huge appreciation for the Julian family, and it's now been my mission to make sure that we see that through. But when that streetscape idea came out, this is exactly a great way to honor someone who so many of us don't know enough about. And that will make this an even more beautiful place, but also a place that people come to see it for. Because almost every day you will see someone stop past the Julian home and look at it. And they're looking at it because they're people who travel here from Germany, from Austria, all over the world to check out that home because they know about the history. Now, what if we're able to increase that rich history by telling more of the story? I think that would be great. I'm super excited. Everyone knows I'm excited about what's going on Oak Park Avenue and that streetscape project as well. I love architecture. I love putting the two together and seeing what we can do underneath the viaducts over there and what we'll be bringing to that South Oak Park area. I think is just amazing. And the business district over there is already pretty cool, but it's going to be even more cool. And for you all that like to take selfies, that's going to be the best spot for you to take selfies going forward.
So that Oak Park is recognized that as a destination is wonderfully affirming. I saw the social media coverage with President Skaman about that award, and I think we already know that this is a great community and we're proud to share it. Josh mentioned a YouTube video that he was inspired by. I'm going to recommend, if you haven't seen already, the Chicago historian Dilla's new YouTube show, You Don't Know Shy. On his 3rd episode, he came and walked around Oak Park. He spent a lot of time talking about Dr. Julian, the home, as well as his biography. And that's just like a really cool new media recognition of what the question asks about the historic significance and recognizing that in Oak Park, and also as just a contemporarily cool place to visit. Please go watch it. He's very cool and very interesting. I have in my notes here support and excitement about the Julian Streetscape Plan, not only to draw that attention and recognition to our history, but to demarcate and give identity to that area, that business corridor, to support those businesses and to make, sort of more identified as a place not just for Oak Parkers to visit, but visitors as well. Okay, is that enough? Sorry.
Yeah, so I just want to say that economic development does not need to have a building in the mix, right? So you can actually contribute to economic development through art. For example, our murals along, Oak Park and many parts, or many of the arts installations that are coming up, they all contribute to a walkable community that is desirable, where people want to come visit and be a part of. So there are the hard assets, the expensive assets that we create, which often gets the majority of our time when we talk about development. But then there are soft assets that contribute just as much, in terms of culture, art, which complements architecture, which do not get enough airtime. And I just want to elevate that and say there are ways to address a walkable community, which contributes to us getting this 50 Best Places award that do not need to be contentious or do not need to have conflict associated with it.
Thank you. So earlier, Ravi implied that he believes that we've met a affordable housing threshold. I firmly disagree. I believe that we need more affordable housing. We've had a loss of our level of racial diversity in our community, but not only for the affordable housing, but also for a sense of belonging in our community. And so I see a lot of opportunity throughout the Village of Oak Park for economic vitality and development. We have already committed to North Avenue, to Roosevelt Road, Oak Park Avenue. I do see, and I appreciate that it's already been mentioned, is the opportunity on Chicago Avenue. And from Harlem to Austin. You see a thriving small business district around Broken Tart that is really starting to grow. I also agree with Ravi that we are a community that's also well known for the arts. We don't capitalize on it as a draw to our community enough. So then you see the Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio just a little bit further east on Chicago Avenue, and then the Oak Park Art League, and then you have the Percy Julian Home and Studio, and the streetscape that would take you to Austin. That streetscape, there's a lot of potential there for small business, build out, and affordable housing.
The last two on this question.
So I'm trying to pull a thread out of the question here that I think has a lot of different threads. And so I think I'll talk a little bit about South Oak Park, which is where I live, and what I think makes South Oak Park really amazing place to live. And what a lot of people really love about Oak Park in general is that walkable streetscape. but What I think really makes South Oak Park special is that walkable streetscape that you have there. My kids they're teens now, and they regularly just like disappear and come back 2 hours later, and they say, "Oh yeah, we went over to Addis and got a chai or a chocolate." And they just walk over there by themselves. That's amazing. And what supports these two really vibrant business districts that we have in South Oak Park, the Arts District and what's called Southtown, I think they're trying to get that name to stick, but it hasn't really, is the amazing amount of housing density around those areas. You know, all those people living around there supports that. So when I talk about economic development, I think they go hand in hand. The Julian streetscape also needs density around it as well for it to thrive, for there to be people to be able to walk to those businesses. So when I think about this question, I really think about the example that we have in South Oak Park and the amazing amount of thriving local businesses that the density we have there provides.
Very good. This award speaks to our architectural and cultural assets, and Oak Park has many. To build on this, I propose promoting heritage tourism through initiatives like guided architectural tours, supporting local arts and cultural events, and enhancing walkable commercial areas that showcase our community's unique character and diversity. For example, and has already been mentioned several times, we need to more effectively promote the history of Percy Julian, which is long overdue, whose family has lived in Oak Park for 75 years through good times and bad times. And the story there is so profound and so moving. We really need to get behind that and get it moving and get it going. So this board, and I think these and all the candidates can agree on that. So thank you.
I'm going to, before I just close up, I wanted to give you a minute to think about this on that last question, what's your favorite place or a couple places that you bring visitors when they come to visit you, or where you would like to recommend? So that you'll have the last word. It's not officially on the question list, but it kind of ties into that, the idea of the tourism here in the community. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you all for somebody staying tonight. Really appreciate it. And I'm tired. I'm sure you're tired too. Thank you so much for the candidates all making it out tonight. I just wanted to say that, obviously we have till April 1st. I know that coming up, please take away the campaign literature, talk to the candidates on the way out. That I know coming up, there's other forums scheduled. Oak Park Workforce League of Women Voters has a calendar on its website that lists forums and campaign events. I know there's something on February 12th sponsored by Arbor West Neighbors, February 20th by the League of Women Voters itself, and February 24th by the Wednesday Journal. So there's other opportunities to keep on learning. Again, focused on one topic, and then sort of variations of that. Look at those last few questions. Ask them some other time, or obviously a lot of these questions are pretty common out in the community, variations of them. So this is not entirely new. So now that I've said sort of thank yous, and please travel safely. It doesn't look like I don't see any ice outside, but I'm going to hand it to Josh and just go down and say, just where do you show people? What do you like about what's an Oak Park touristy experience to you? Real quickly.
Well, I think I already gave it away, and I really love South Oak Park. I love to take our relatives over there and just kind of highlight what we have there, and then also another stop would be the Lake Street Theater downtown.
Very good. For me, I would, of course, kudos to Frank to take people to the History Museum. It's wonderful. It's a great place to learn about our history, and it's a great way to spend an afternoon. But I would just also add, for fine dining, I like to go to Victory Italian. It is a Chicago quality restaurant with quality food in Oak Park, and I don't think you get any better than that. Thank you.
I would say Berry Park. I grew up in South Oak Park across the street from Ascension. And South Oak Park holds a special place in my heart for sure. But Berry Park in particular, it's one of our largest green spaces in such a dense community. So a little bit of a gem. It also is the place where a tree and a plaque have been planted in honor of my late sister, who also grew up here. And so it holds some very special personal relevance for me.
So I haven't taken any visitors to the Frank Lloyd Wright home, and since my daughter could be warm there, because I have really little kids, and so we don't go to many places other than all of the coffee shops and all of the local parks. I think Taylor Park is my favorite, and so when people come to visit, we still have to spend time with our kids. So we do things that they like to do, and usually our visitors are okay with that.
This is going to be cheesy and a little conceited, but I've done this since my son was born. Since he was little, we would go to the high school. There's a picture of me in the stadium still from when I played football. So I would hold him up and I'd put him on my arm and we'd stand next to the picture. And then my son is now 6'7.5". So I can't hold him up, but I take people there because I love that stadium and I hate it at the same time because I had to run those steps so much. So it's taking people back there. And then the other spot that I like so much is Addis, because every time I go there, I get choked up because I feel so seen and people are so kind in that space. And then also what it represents about true low income and knowing that it's affordable for people. So I really love taking people there.
801 South Oak Park Avenue is a really, truly amazing building that I do like to show people. And I do agree that that's another area for economic vitality. We will see expanded bridges over the Eisenhower Expressway. Excuse me. But the corner that I just believe is absolutely gorgeous is outside of Port Phillips. I used to go to Port Phillips with my mother when I was 16 for, it was our girls' night out for clam chowder. And just the Italian lights on that corner, being able to look north towards the downtown area, it's truly absolutely beautiful. And I love the urban scene too, of seeing the train, go by and walk the park by the Pleasant Home.
Yeah, I think it's a long list of things, but I'll start with Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio. That's where I take most people first. But the view outside of Scoville, so the library, viewing that at night, with the lights on, that is something I hold very special. So I do that ride whenever people come here. And then, obviously, the local restaurants are near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time with them, in them, putting on a lot of calories. Most of these owners are like family to me. So I try to take people who visit me to local restaurants, so much so that I don't go to Chicago and patronize businesses there anymore, because every time I have to go out and eat, I feel like I need to support the local businesses. So.
Thank you all for